Hi, my name's Adam Shilcock, and I am a partner manager here at Huntress. And we work very, very closely with Urban Network to provide 24/7 advanced threat detection and response capabilities. Ultimately, we look at things like your PCs, your laptops, your server infrastructure, but also your cloud applications, specifically Microsoft 365, to hunt out threat actors that may be residing in those systems and platforms to try and kick them out, get rid of them from the IT environment before they carry out something like a ransomware attack or a business email compromise attack. Today, I want to specifically talk about identity threat detection and response, so the product that we have that protects your Microsoft 365 environment. Um, Today's landscape in terms of the digital landscape, the security landscape has changed dramatically in the last sort of 5 to 6 years. Uh, we're obviously now seeing users work from anywhere, anytime, accessing corporate applications like Microsoft 365 from home, coffee shops, really anywhere there's an internet connection they have access to. And this type of landscape has meant that organizations are fighting a battle against threat actors on multiple fronts. Users being geographically dispersed makes it inherently more difficult to keep your business data and your overall business safe and secure. Things like unauthorized access to these digital platforms, identity theft and misuse, having tons of alerts from all these different platforms and what your users are doing and where they're accessing from, and the amount of data that is being created in these platforms. These are all huge challenges that certainly the SMB is struggling to kind of keep up with. And at Huntress, we want to try and resolve these issues. We want to try and provide a platform and a security tool that allows organizations like Urban to really efficiently and really effectively keep your business secure and find those threat actors and keep them out of your environment. Um, Now, there are ways that you can protect your environment initially. Making sure that you have multi-factor authentication in place, so that users have that element of, verification that it is them using their username and password to log in to Microsoft 365. If you have a Microsoft 365 Business Premium license, for example, you can implement things like conditional access policies, essentially rules that allow users to access Microsoft 365 when certain conditions have been met. And also things like email spam filters that will stop phishing emails from initially coming into your environment. These are all really recommended tools from a Huntress perspective that you need to have in place to initially secure your environment. But having said that, the point of this slide is to really highlight that these solutions aren't really enough anymore. These should be things that have been in place for a good while now in your organization, and if they're not, certainly would recommend you talking to Urban Network about getting these sort of things in place. But what we're seeing within our security operations center is that these types of solutions are now being bypassed by more sophisticated tactics and techniques that these threat actors are using. And to talk about, some more specifically, credential abuse, for example, was the initial access vector in 2023, the top initial access vector in 2023. And session hijacking, which I'll explain in just a moment, was found in 50% of all of those security misconfigurations globally as well. So we're talking about a huge issue here. I'm sure the 2024 data, when that's available, will just highlight the kind of the exponential increase in this type of environment and this type of abuse, only increasing rather than decreasing. And to talk more specifically about the tactics and techniques that attackers are now using to bypass those initial preventative measures, things like credential theft and session hijacking. Now, credential theft can occur because maybe you don't have some of those initial preventative tools in place today. And this is a relatively basic tactic and technique that attackers will use, because all they're doing is really stealing your password and username. If they have access to that, they can access your environment because you don't have multi-factor authentication mechanisms in place. How would that occur? Well, if you have poor password hygiene, like you're reusing passwords from both personal and business applications, if they're weak passwords, if you're storing passwords in a browser rather than a dedicated, password manager, um, this is where you're potentially vulnerable. And these are kind of basic techniques that you can use to just increase your security posture and kind of reduce the risk of this type of attack happening in the first place. But session hijacking, this is a much more sophisticated attack that we're seeing only increase in terms of the number of scenarios that we're seeing where a Microsoft 365 environment has been attacked. This is the initial access kind of vector and technique that threat actors are using more and more. And these can bypass some of those preventative measures. And it actually starts with a successful phishing attack. So maybe that email and spam filter hasn't worked effectively, and attackers are now being able to get through those kind of those tools and still successfully get a user to click on a phishing link that they really shouldn't be. And these phishing emails that come through are becoming more and more real and much more difficult to identify if they're not legitimate. But what that'll do, a user will click on that link and they'll be taken to effectively a legitimate sign-in to Microsoft 365, but it will be through a proxy server the attacker has set up so they can be in the middle of that sign-in attempt and they can take things like the credentials. They can allow the MFA authentication process to be carried out successfully. But what they'll do is they'll then take the session token that is created upon a legitimate and successful sign-in. Once they have that session, they can just put it into their browser and they have access and unfiltered access to your Microsoft 365 environment. Point solutions are not enough. You need to have these, MFA and conditional access policies in place. You certainly need email filtering as well. But because they can be bypassed, you need another mechanism in place to be able to detect this and stop a business email compromise attack from happening. And that's where Huntress comes in. We can detect when a session hijacking or a credential theft attack has occurred, and we can see a bad actor using the tactics and techniques that would be required to successfully carry out a session or credential theft hijack. But we also look at things like shady VPN activity, suspicious proxies, everything around the sign-in event we will be looking at and we have detections for to make sure that if it's a bad actor trying to log in, we will be able to detect that and kick them out of the environment very, very quickly. But we also detect on things the attacker may be doing in the environment as well. So even if the attacker brings out a really new technique that no one has ever seen before, they'll do very specific behaviors like shadow workflows here. So this will be like suspicious inbox rules where they'll have things like emails that have invoice or bank account within the subject or within the body of the email. They'll be forwarded to some external domains or an RSS feed. We can look at that type of behavior that a threat actor will carry out, which is very indicative of a business email compromise attack. And of course, things like privilege escalations as well. So if an attacker gets access to a user that doesn't have admin permissions, but they're able to kind of navigate the system and give themselves global admin permissions and the ability to download rogue applications that can carry out nefarious activities in your environment as well. So this is where the detect and respond really comes in, and where the value of a 24/7 SOC service comes into play here. Because even though you've got some security measures in place, if they're able to bypass that and you don't have a detect and respond solution in place, then attackers can be in your environment for days, weeks, potentially even months, carrying out all sorts of behavior that you wouldn't kind of necessarily be aware of, and ultimately the damage that is caused for an attacker being in your environment for that long will be far greater than if we can detect that as soon as possible and kick those threat actors out of the environment. So last word from me, it's very, very important that you have sort of layered security tools and software in place to prevent attackers in the first place, but also capture them and detect them as soon as possible, so that the damage that is caused uh, when you have a breach is limited. And we can do that in ways that actually kicks attackers out, within minutes of them successfully signing in to your Microsoft 365 environment. So again, thank you very much. I hope that was useful, informative, and I hope to be back again soon. Thanks very much. Bye.